The moment I saw the subject line, compensation adjustment, my heart actually skipped. I thought maybe, just maybe, after 16 years of grinding in this niche tech field, someone finally saw me. Then I opened the email. A 4% raise. 4%. On a salary that was already minimum wage. And when I voiced concern, they called me ungrateful. I've never been someone who asked for much. I don't like rocking the boat. I've always believed in putting my head down, doing the work, and letting the results speak for themselves. That's how I was raised. That's how I've survived. I'm Serafina. I'm 40 years old. I hold 2 degrees, one in applied systems engineering, the other in food production technologies. I've spent the last 16 years building a very specific kind of technical expertise that only a handful of people in the country understand. I troubleshoot legacy automation systems used in high-speed food manufacturing, systems most young techs won't touch because they weren't trained on them. My current company, a massive national food producer based in Ohio, hired me 2 years ago after one of their plants nearly lost a key client due to a packaging malfunction. I fixed it remotely in under 18 hours. No fanfare, no thank you bonus, just a signed offer letter and a salary of $15 an hour, which, at 40 hours a week, comes out to roughly $31,200 a year. At the time, it felt like an opportunity. After all, it was a foot in the door. But now? 2 years in, still making the same amount, until that email came in last week. I was in the break room when I opened it. One of those beige walls, harsh fluorescent lights kind of break rooms that smells like burnt coffee and reheated soup. I scrolled past the corporate fluff. We value your contributions. We've worked with external compensation consultants in recognition of your ongoing efforts until I hit the number, 4% increase. Do you know what 4% of $31,200 is? It's $1,248 per year. After taxes, that's maybe $20 extra a week. $20. That's not even my gas money for the week. I felt my face flush, not with excitement, but shame. And not because I felt unworthy, but because they thought this would satisfy me, that this would shut me up. Later that day, I went to my manager. I waited until everyone had left the office. I didn't want to cause a scene. I just wanted to speak plainly. I said, I appreciate the raise, but after 16 years in this field, it's hard not to feel like I'm being underpaid. I'm still technically earning minimum wage, even after this. He didn't even blink. You should be grateful, he said. Most people aren't getting anything, and you've only been here 2 years. You want market rate? Go get market results. I stood there, silent. My palms were sweating. My tongue felt thick. I wanted to say, I've saved your client accounts. I've trained the juniors who don't last 6 months. I've written SOPs that are still being used in 3 departments. I'm the one they call when something breaks and no one else understands the wiring diagram. But instead, I just nodded. And that night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling fan, listening to its slow, even hum. My husband rolled over and whispered, Don't let them steal your joy, Serafina. Work like you're paid. He meant well, he always does. But that's the thing, I wasn't paid to care. And yet I did, every damn day. And now, they've made it very clear, my care was cheap. There's a kind of silence that doesn't feel peaceful. It feels sharp. It cuts. The day after I questioned my raise, that silence greeted me the moment I stepped into the office. Conversations dulled, eyes flicked away, and smiles thinned just enough to let me know I had broken an unspoken rule. I had said the quiet part out loud. And in my company, that's the fastest way to become invisible. It didn't happen in some dramatic, HR-documented way. No meetings, no warnings, just subtle slights stacked neatly on top of one another, like quiet bricks building a wall around me. I wasn't fired, but I was being phased out. The day started like any other. I logged into the network, pulled up the maintenance queue, and saw that my access to one of the core systems had been revoked. No explanation. When I asked the new junior tech about it, he shrugged. "Oh, they're testing access levels. Nothing personal." Everything is nothing personal when it's being done to you. At lunch, the table I normally sat at had filled up, except one seat, mine. No one looked up when I approached, so I ate alone, in the side conference room, pretending I had meetings. I'd always thought loyalty bought protection. That being helpful, positive, the one who stayed late and smoothed tensions, meant something. But it didn't, not here. Even my manager, who once called me the glue of the team, had shifted. His tone had cooled, and his gaze never quite met mine anymore. The easy camaraderie we'd shared had vanished, replaced with stiff check-ins and vague platitudes. "I hope you're adjusting to the changes well, Serafina." Adjusting to what? Being erased? The worst part was that I kept performing. Out of habit, out of fear, maybe even out of pride. I couldn't let myself become what they expected, a bitter woman dragging her feet. So I double-checked reports that weren't mine. I answered calls that others ignored. I stayed late to ensure a line wouldn't go down on the overnight shift. And not once did anyone say, "Thank you." What they did say, however, was far more telling. One of the younger engineers walked by my cubicle and said under his breath, "Guess even dinosaurs get raises now." I didn't respond. What was there to say? That I wasn't old, just experienced? That the systems they relied on were ones I'd mastered while they were still in school? Later that week, I posted anonymously on a professional tech forum for women in STEM, hoping to find support or advice. I shared my story, just the facts, no drama. But the responses, some were kind, but many echoed what I'd already heard. "You should be grateful. At least you got something. Try being in healthcare. Stop complaining and move on," as if asking to be valued was a character flaw. At home, my husband tried to hold space for me. He really did. But even his comfort felt distant now. His advice, "Just do your job, keep your head down," felt like another silencing, though I knew he meant well. What no one seemed to understand was this. It wasn't about the money anymore. It was about what that 4% said about how they saw me. How they reduced 16 years of mastery, sacrifice, and invisible labor into a performance review footnote. I was tired. Not physically, but existentially. Tired of proving myself in a place that had already decided who I was. And yet somehow, I still believed I could turn it around, because I hadn't yet learned the most painful truth. You can't fix a culture that's already decided you're disposable. It wasn't one moment. That's the lie they sell you in movies, that everything cracks all at once. In real life, the breaking happens slowly, like water finding its way through stone, wearing you down molecule by molecule until one day, you look at yourself in the mirror and don't recognize the woman staring back. That morning, I forgot to set my alarm. Not because I was tired, but because I didn't care if I was late. That terrified me. I used to be proud of my punctuality. I was the kind of person who arrived 10 minutes early, coffee in hand, ready to take on whatever fire the day held. But now, as I shuffled into work with a knot in my stomach and eyes that burned from another sleepless night, I realized I was mourning something deeper than a paycheck. I was grieving my dignity. The team had moved on without me. I was no longer invited to brainstorm sessions. The junior staff stopped asking for help, probably told not to. My name disappeared from internal reports I'd contributed to. And the final nail? They replaced me on a long-term client optimization project. No explanation, just a new meeting invite without my name on it. I stared at that blank spot on the calendar for almost 10 minutes, feeling hollow. It wasn't about ego, it was about effort. The hours I'd invested, the details only I remembered, the patches I'd written, the undocumented fixes I'd discovered when no one else could replicate a system bug. That work was mine, but I was being erased from it, pixel by pixel. And then came the comment, the one that shattered what little restraint I had left. I was walking past the lunchroom when I overheard two colleagues talking. They weren't being loud, but they weren't exactly whispering either. She acts like she deserves more. 4% and she is still complaining? What did she expect? VP of Engineering? Laughter, a pause. Honestly, if she weren't so emotional, she might have actually gotten somewhere. Emotional. That word again, that blade disguised as feedback. I stood outside the doorway, frozen. Not from shock, but from the way those words sank into something old and sore inside me. I remembered being 24, fresh out of grad school, being told by a manager that I was too passionate during a team presentation. I remembered being 29 and getting passed over for promotion because I cared too much about user experience and not enough about the business side. I remembered every time I'd smiled, swallowed it, and thanked them for the feedback. But this time, I didn't feel grateful. I felt betrayed. I went home that night and didn't speak during dinner. My husband watched me closely, gently setting down his fork. "You're somewhere else." I looked at him. "I think I'm done trying." He leaned forward, his voice soft. "Done trying to what?" "To prove I belong." There was a stillness in the room after that, the kind that comes when something breaks, but quietly, like glass under velvet. The next day, I didn't offer ideas in the morning meeting. I didn't correct the calculations on the output forecast, even though I knew they were off by nearly 11%. I didn't stay late when the line glitched again at 4:50 p.m. And you know what happened? Nothing. No one noticed. And that, more than anything, confirmed what I already suspected. I'd become invisible before I ever stopped trying. That weekend, I opened my resume for the first time in 4 years. It felt like dusting off a version of myself I'd forgotten. I updated my certifications, reformatted the layout, and hesitated over the salary field. What was I even worth anymore? I checked Glassdoor, Payscale, LinkedIn. With my experience, my skill set, even accounting for location, I should have been earning at least $65K. I was making just over $32K. Half. I stared at that gap, feeling the weight of it settle on my chest. How many years had I been underpaid? 5? 10? I started applying, selectively at first, then daily, sometimes hourly. And something strange happened. Recruiters started calling. They asked why I was looking. I told them I wanted to grow. I left out the truth. I was trying to remember what it felt like to be respected. Most companies offered 55K, 58K. Some went up to 62K. One said, "You're a bit overqualified, but we like your tone." Tone. Always the tone. But one company, a small but growing food tech startup based out of Denver, they asked to meet the very next day. And as I closed my laptop, heart racing, I felt something I hadn't in months. Hope. The quiet kind. The kind that doesn't announce itself, but slips into your chest and says, "You're not done yet." The interview went well. Better than I expected, actually. The hiring manager didn't blink when I told him about the systems I'd worked on or the processes I'd designed from scratch. He didn't ask why I was still making so little. He only said, "That kind of experience? We need that yesterday." But I didn't accept right away. There was one piece of me, call it loyalty, call it habit, call it fear, that still clung to my current job like it meant something. Like maybe someone would notice, stop me in the hallway and say, "Wait, we were wrong, please stay." But no one did. And then something happened. A quiet shift I hadn't seen coming. Our biggest client, Juno Fresh, a national distributor that accounted for nearly 40% of our plant's volume, scheduled a last-minute process audit. They wanted a walkthrough of our facility, a demo of our latest quality control updates, and a breakdown of our efficiency metrics over the past quarter. This would have been my domain. In fact, the system they wanted to see? I'd written the integration manual myself, but I wasn't even looped into the prep meetings. They handed it to Evan, the junior tech who once referred to me as a dinosaur. I said nothing, offered no reminders, didn't correct the outdated documentation he pulled from an old shared drive. Didn't mention that the interface he planned to demo had a broken logic string I had patched manually a month prior. And I felt no guilt, because when you erase someone, you lose access to everything they carry: the quiet expertise, the unwritten fixes, the relationships. I watched from a distance as the walkthrough unfolded. I wasn't supposed to be near the conference area, but I passed by just in time to catch a glimpse of the Juno lead auditor staring blankly at the screen as Evan stumbled through a half-explained data flowchart. Their face said everything. 3 hours later, I got a text. Not from my manager, not from anyone in leadership. It was from Carla, a senior operations rep from Juno who had worked with me directly on 6 prior rollouts. She wrote, "Hey, just curious, are you okay? We noticed you weren't part of today's demo. Didn't feel like your team without you." I stared at the message, stunned. Not because she noticed, but because it had been so long since anyone cared enough to ask. I replied simply, "Still here, but not really." She read it instantly, no response. But she didn't need to say anything. The damage was already done. The following morning, whispers moved faster than production. Something about Juno pushing back the next shipment schedule. Something about concerns over operational continuity. My manager's face had a new shade of pale, and leadership's emails became urgent all of a sudden. I sat at my desk, typing calmly, as the structure I had once held together began to crack. And in that moment, I realized I didn't have to scream, didn't have to burn anything down. All I had to do was walk away. Because sometimes when a system is built on silence and dismissal, all it takes is one missing voice for the whole thing to collapse. I didn't hand in a grand resignation letter, no carefully crafted speech, no mic drop, just a short email sent at 7:13 a.m. on a Wednesday. Subject: Transition. Dear team, I want to thank you for the opportunities and challenges over the past 2 years. I've accepted a new position that better aligns with my professional growth. My last day will be Friday. I've documented all outstanding processes in the shared folder. Best, Serafina. That was it. I closed my laptop, sipped my coffee, and exhaled. There was no ceremony, no farewell cupcakes in the break room, just the sound of my own heartbeat, steady and quiet. It was the most peace I'd felt in months. I told no one at work beforehand, not even the people who used to smile politely at me in the hallway. I didn't owe anyone a warning, because the truth was, I had already left emotionally long before I sent that email. My new company, TrueGrow Labs, a small food tech startup in Denver, had offered me $72,000 with room to grow, flexible hours, and a remote option. But it wasn't just the money, it was the way they talked to me. Like I was someone worth listening to, someone they needed, not someone they were tolerating. They asked real questions in the interview. They didn't just look at my resume, they asked about my process, my logic, how I troubleshoot when systems collapse. It had been so long since anyone was interested in how I think. The moment I said yes to their offer, something uncoiled inside me. Not anger, not relief. Permission. Permission to stop proving myself to people who had no intention of seeing me clearly. Permission to walk away without guilt. Permission to take up space again. Back at my old job, no one responded to my resignation email until almost noon. My manager replied with a simple, "Thanks for letting us know. Best of luck." He didn't ask where I was going. He didn't ask why. But by Thursday, the panic started to show. My inbox, which had been mostly silent for weeks, lit up like a Christmas tree. Subject lines like, "Need clarification on your notes," and "Do you remember where X file is?" and "Urgent client request" flooded in. I didn't answer any of them, because I had already given more than enough. Friday came and went with barely a ripple on the surface. No exit interview, no "we'll miss you," just silence, the same kind they'd used to push me out. But underneath, tension was building. The following week, I received a message from Carla at Juno. "Just wanted to let you know, we've officially pulled the renewal. Their team wasn't prepared. You were the reason we stayed as long as we did." One sentence, And yet, it felt like a vindication louder than any confrontation ever could. I didn't reply right away. I let it sit. I read it again before bed, and once more the next morning. Because something about it reminded me that quiet exits don't mean powerless ones. When a system treats you as invisible, they never expect your absence to leave a mark. But mine did. Without my oversight, shipments started going out late. Response times to Juno's support requests doubled. An automation glitch, one I'd flagged months earlier, resurfaced and halted production for nearly 11 hours. I didn't celebrate their chaos. I didn't need to. I just watched from a distance as the same people who called me ungrateful now scrambled to understand the systems I had built. Systems I had kept running with duct tape and dedication. And on the first Monday at my new job, something incredible happened. They introduced me on the morning call as our newest systems architect. I hadn't even asked for a title. But they gave me one anyway. Not because I demanded it, because they saw what I brought to the table. That afternoon, I got an email from the founder herself. She wrote, "Serafina, your documentation is some of the best I've seen. I don't know how your last company ever let you go, but we're lucky they did." And I sat there, staring at those words, not crying, just full. Because after all the silencing, all the humiliation, all the subtle erasure, someone had finally said what I knew in my gut all along. I was never the problem. I was the foundation. They didn't see it coming. They never do. The first public sign of trouble came 2 weeks after I left, when a memo was accidentally leaked to internal staff. A client, Juno's direct competitor, had backed out of a co-manufacturing deal, citing infrastructure concerns and team instability. It spread like wildfire through Slack threads and whispered hallway conversations. My former manager tried to keep it under wraps, but the damage had already metastasized. The plant missed 2 shipment deadlines in a single week. Audits revealed documentation gaps so large, they had to halt operations for an entire weekend. One of the newer techs made an error during a manual override that triggered a shutdown across 3 lines. They blamed it on system bugs. But those weren't bugs. Those were minefields I had been quietly diffusing for the better part of 2 years. The leadership team scrambled to patch things together, offering overtime, bonuses, even reaching out to former contractors for temporary support. Then, one afternoon, I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. It was my former director. His voice was tense, brittle with desperation. "Serafina, we're hoping you might be open to consulting. Just temporarily. We've had a few setbacks, and you know the systems better than anyone. Of course, we'd compensate accordingly. Please give me a call." I listened twice. Not out of interest, but because part of me still couldn't believe they had the nerve to ask. Compensate accordingly. They'd called me ungrateful. They'd pushed me to the margins. And now that the very structure they neglected was crumbling, they wanted to buy their way back in. I didn't call him back. Instead, I forwarded the message to my husband with a single line. Funny how silence gets loud when things fall apart. At TrueGrow, I had just finished presenting a system redesign plan that received unanimous approval. My manager shook my hand and said, "We're lucky you chose us." No politics, no diminishing, just respect. And as I closed my laptop that evening, I knew I'd never need to look back. 3 months later, I was invited to speak on a panel at a regional food tech summit. The topic, Legacy Systems and Leadership Blind Spots. I almost declined, but something inside me, steady, not spiteful, said yes. I wore a navy blue blazer that day. No name badge, no title displayed. Just Serafina. When I walked into the venue, I saw them instantly. My former director and 2 team leads. They were seated in the 3rd row, eyes scanning the schedule, unaware I was about to take the stage. Until I did. And when they heard my name announced, their faces froze. I didn't look at them when I spoke. I didn't have to. I talked about the danger of undervaluing silent labor. How some systems only run smoothly because someone's quietly patching holes no one else knows exist. I spoke about how loyalty shouldn't be used as leverage, and how some companies don't lose people. They throw them away before realizing what they had. I never said their names, but they knew. After the panel, a small crowd gathered. Startup founders, engineers, even a Juno rep who shook my hand and said, "You said what a lot of us have lived." As I packed up, I saw my former director hovering nearby. He looked like he wanted to approach, but I turned away. Because closure isn't always a conversation. Sometimes it's a room full of people who finally see you, and a man who has to live with the fact that he didn't. If you've ever been told to be grateful for scraps while carrying the weight of an entire system on your back, know this. Your worth isn't defined by who fails to see it. It's defined by what happens when you take that value somewhere it's respected. Have you ever left a job that only realized your impact once you were gone? Let's talk about it in the comments. Because your silence? It might just be the loudest thing they hear.